You are an entrepreneur, a business mogul, a future tycoon, and you've been looking for a podcast that knows and talks business like no other podcast in the world. This is the BizBeatdown Podcast. If you're passionate about business or itching to start your own venture, or maybe you're already knee-deep in the exhilarating chaos of running your own show, we're dishing out the secrets, strategies, and the street smarts to help you not just survive, but thrive in the wild world of business. And now your hosts, Vincent Pennix and Patrick Barbour.
And today we have a special with just Patrick and myself. Patrick, how are you doing?
I'm good, brother. Just you and me, man. Back where it all began.
Yeah, exactly. It's good to have these sometimes and be able to just catch up on things. We just to let everybody know, we do have some exciting guests coming up, some really cool things that we're going to be discussing. But today we just wanted to kind of have a little session with just us and just be able to kind of talk through a couple of things. So, yeah, man, I'm excited to be back on with you.
Hell yeah. Likewise. How you been?
Good, man. Good. Just, busy getting after it, so we can share more lessons with everybody and, hopefully we can all learn in this. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
How about you?
Cool. Let's get into it. Same, just, biz, family, we're still building this house, which has been a learning experience, and a test in patience and, all of that good stuff. But no, man, I'm good. Grateful.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to get right into it today. So the one thing I really wanted to cover, we'll see, there's another topic we can potentially cover as well, but I feel like this first one might take us pretty much the majority of the time, that I really wanted to cover today was how to allocate finances in business, especially for the newer to growing business owner. How to really best allocate those finances, where to spend the money, knowing when to spend the money, when you don't have money, knowing how to handle it, whether you should go out and get loans and stuff like that. Why don't we just start from like square one, I guess we could call it,
Sure.
Or start from like the beginning. Let's say you're starting up your business and you maybe have like, what's a fair amount to say? I don't feel like everybody starts with $100,000 in the bank.
No, I would say most people don't.
Yeah. So let's say you start with like, I don't know, man, like 10,000. What would be your advice on the best way to kind of like allocate finances and make smart financial decisions? Especially when you're in the beginning phases.
Yeah, so I think, for me, in terms of like cash flow management and the way that you actually manage your money, that's constantly evolving. And it really kind of depends on what season of your business you're in. That's definitely been my experience, and that's constantly evolving. And out of the gate, I mean, in terms of like how much money do you need, to get started and this sort of thing, obviously that's going to completely depend on what business you're getting into. And if you are starting something, a lot of people have recommended this and I would co-sign it. You definitely want to do some sort of service-based business where you can exchange your time for money. Because until, you have something built up, that's really the only asset that you have, in addition to whatever skill it is that you're leveraging to deliver value. But in terms of money, startup money and, nest egg and all that, that's going to depend. Recruiting, you don't need a ton of money, right? You probably need maybe less than $5,000 to get started. And honestly, you could probably have worked with people that have started with much less than that and have just kind of winged it month to month. And you can do that too. Obviously, it's more stressful. But, I think, when you're first starting out in terms of how to manage the finances and what you should be focusing on, and as money comes in, what do you do with that money? For me, there's like an immediate first three things that you should be doing when you're launching any business. The very first priority is to cash flow as fast as possible, right? Like no matter what it is you're doing, whether it's recruiting or something else, like to get that positive cash flow where you are actually a profitable business is your utmost number one priority. And then there's kind of a second priority that is like almost just as important, but not quite. We'll call it like 1A and 1B. So 1A would be to cash flow as fast as possible. 1B to me would be cost control, right? So those two kind of go hand in hand, especially as you're kind of in takeoff mode, right? In launch mode. And so, you the money that you do have, whatever that number is, you want to conserve it as long as possible, because ultimately that's going to extend your runway until you do actually cash flow, right? So, those two things are, at least in the very beginning, for me, those are the two things that you're ultimately focused on. And that is the first objective that you're trying to reach, right? At least at a high level. Now, in order to get to that, you have a lot of different goals, mini goals, if you will, that if executed, ultimately result in that first, positive cash flow. But that is the scoreboard that you should be watching at least out of the gate, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I agree. As far as, let's say, okay, I've been seeing like a couple of different opinions on this as far as whether you should, once you start making some money, should you be saving like some money off to the side, kind of like for yourself, and be like, kind of have an emergency fund ready, or, be saving some for whatever reason for yourself? Or should you just be taking most, if not all of it, and just investing back into the business? What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's situation is different, right? And so in a perfect world,
let's say you're a younger entrepreneur, maybe in your early 20s or even early 30s, and you don't have kids or a family or anything to worry about.
Think you should be living at home with your parents. No bullshit. You should be living at home with your parents and have maybe a cell phone bill, right? Maybe you help chip in for the internet and you buy some groceries and you have a gym membership, and that's it. Like literally, that should be it. In a perfect world, like if you had your druthers, every profit, every dollar that you earn should be reinvested back in the business, right? Mm-hmm. Cash is the lifeblood of any business, and the more you have of it, growth. It's not automatic, but it does need to be present in order for growth to occur, right? And so the more that you have, the more opportunities and probability that you have to actually continuing on and living to see another day and potentially hitting the next level in, growth within whatever it is that you're doing. And so for me, I started out by saying there are three things, and I only told you two. The third thing is, once you do begin to cash flow, the very next thing that you should be focusing on is your cash reserve, right, for the business itself, the rainy day fund, the nest egg. And so that's going to vary, depending on whatever business you're in. A good way to kind of benchmark that, though, is to really kind of sit down and think through, okay, worst case scenario in my business right now, should some sort of worst case, a black swan event, right, like COVID or, whatever, we hit another recession or, fill in the blank, bad thing happens and business goes to zero, how long do I think it's going to take me to get things back on track, right? And so whatever that answer is what I would recommend you do is take whatever that is. So I'll use recruiting as an example.
Yeah.
Typically in the recruiting industry, I think that if everything were to go to shit, within 3 months, you could probably figure out a way to get back on track so that you have new clients coming back in and you can begin to cash flow again, right? And so using that, not saying that applies to every business, 3 months times 2, 6 months is kind of the benchmark, the initial cash reserve that I would like to work towards to get into place as fast as possible, right? That is kind of like the third objective in terms of like money management out of the gate as you're launching. That's what I've done. And that's what I think is the most conservative and stable way, because with that reserve, what you've done is you've obviously guaranteed the life of your business for however long that is, right? In this example, it'd be 6 months, but also it psychologically as a business owner, it relieves a lot of stress and pressure, right? For you to begin to start making moves to grow your business. You feel like you're in a little bit more of a stable place. Not to say that has necessarily stabilized your business, because you need to continue to generate revenue for it to truly be stabilized. But man, it goes a hell of a long way to be able to start making moves like hiring an onshore recruiter or, investing in another tool or, whatever the case may be, because it's not as tight, right? You got a runway to figure it out and, that sort of thing. So you're operating what the reserve does is not only, the obvious of, hey, something bad happens, things shut down. I've got, 6 months to figure it out. But beyond that, it psychologically kind of frees you up to be able to kind of maneuver a little bit and shake things up and not have the pressure of every new thing that you try have to work right now because you don't have, next month figured out or the month after that and so on and so forth, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I think that like what happens though, and speaking, having gone through this myself, and I'm sure you have too, where it's just like the tough part is like when you're saving up like that 6 month reserve, right? But like you're going to save it up, but then you could be if you took some of that money and then like spent it towards ads or whatever, you would accelerate your business faster and probably ultimately get that 6 month reserve faster in the long, it's like, do you feel like sometimes though that you could be like slowing down your business by like not reinvesting back in and being so focused on the 6 month reserve that you're not actually putting that money to where it could go to grow the business faster? I don't know if there's a right answer to this, dude. I'm just telling you what everybody's gone through. Sure. Yeah, thinking when they're going through this. Yeah,
it's definitely a dynamic decision that you have to make in the moment. And there's a lot of different variables in terms of the environment that you're operating in into how to navigate. But and so to say, every profit that I'm going to earn is going to build up to this 6 month reserve. Ideally, the offer that you have created and the business that you've created, the profitability is such that it shouldn't be a huge stretch for you. You know what I mean? It shouldn't take you 2 years to save up 6 months worth of cash reserve. So I want to say that, like, for example, in recruiting, if your average placement is $20,000 a pop and you're a solopreneur, a solo recruiter, a one-person show, I mean, you could theoretically get to that 6 month reserve in 2 to 3 months, right? Even shorter, and depending on, how good you are and all of that kind of stuff. And that is how it should be. It shouldn't take you forever to get to that reserve. If it does, then you're probably not priced correctly, or your costs are higher than they should be. One of the two, or maybe even both, right? But that margin is not where it should be in order to kind of build that up. Plus, in addition to kind of your point, Vince, you're absolutely right, because you do have other things that you're trying to do in terms of scaling your business. And I would say, yes, there are probably instances where you will and should be also not only socking away for cash reserve, but also reinvesting in other things so that you don't slow down the momentum of growth of your company. That all makes sense, and yes, that is reality. But that's going to be kind of a game time decision by the person, kind of in the moment, right? In assessing what's going on to know how best to do that. But to completely abandon the reserve commitment is a huge mistake. And a lot of people do that, right? They just take the money and they're like, man, I'm pouring it back into ads. I'm pouring it back into hiring this person. I'm pouring it back into blah, 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 blah. And things are just really still super tight in the business financially. And what that does is you've increased your costs, right? You have nothing to fall back on, and it's basically do or die every month, right? So if for whatever reason you have a down month or it doesn't work out the way you thought it was going to be, it could be a catastrophic event in your business, and you could go bye-bye, right? And so that's what we obviously want to avoid. Now, as you do work towards that reserve, and once you've achieved that reserve, you then, in my experience, what's happened is you go into this kind of ebb and flow, the seesaw event of where what you're focusing on in your business, at least in my experience. And so what I mean by that is, once reserve is achieved, now what do I do with my profits? Well, if I'm not already paying myself something, I'm definitely paying myself, right? That's probably something that I'm doing. But then what am I reinvesting back into the business? And that's kind of the bigger question and what you should be trying to figure out. And so it's usually going to bounce back from investing in furthering and amplifying your business development, right? And bringing in more sales and growing your revenue. And then very quickly, once you achieve that, your investment will come back into the fulfillment side of your business and rebolstering that, because now the demand is super high and you'll probably have service delivery issues that you're going to need to solve for. And so, and then conversely, once you have that stabilized, you'll shift back over to, the front end of your business and how you grow revenue. That will grow to a certain point. Whatever constraint is there, you'll remove it. It'll grow. And then boom, you're going to have service delivery issues that you're going to have to catch up to. And so it's a bit of a balancing act and a seesaw act, but in my experience, at least so far, that's kind of the loop that you get stuck on. And it's not really a loop because you're constantly growing, but those are the two things that you're bouncing back and forth from.
Well, especially in our industry, especially in recruiting, there's those two sides, and you definitely get that seesaw thing. I think maybe more.
Well, even like say you're in e-com, right? And you're selling a widget. I mean, same thing, right? The first thing is we're designing a product, and then we're investing in inventory of that. Now we're going to go market it, right? All right. Now we got clients coming in. Okay, now we're selling out. Now we got to increase production. All right, what do we need to do? We need a new facility. We need to hire more people. We need more machines. We need more distribution. Okay, boom, we got that. Now we need to sell this shit. All right, let's go figure out. You know what I mean? That is kind of like the back and forth. And I'm sure there are business models out there where it's like, oh, not my business. And okay, cool for you. Like maybe that's not the case, but I think for the majority of businesses, that is kind of the effect there, right? So
yeah. What are your thoughts on on especially if somebody's in that beginner phase and they haven't quite got to profit, but they need money in order to kind of make so let's just talk recruiting, for example. And this could be insurance, this could be other things, but actually, let's not do recruiting because I want to make it a little less specific to my scenario, kind of just speak business in general. Let's talk about
Sure.
insurance for somebody's in insurance sales, they've started insurance or whatever else like that. They can only maybe sometimes grow as much as the ads that they have out or the clients that they're able to bring on sometimes through ads. And so they need to be able to grow, but they need more ad money in order to be able to get more people, and they have to kind of spend that money in order for them to be. So let's say that, when you're in the very early phase, if you don't have a lot saved up, what are your thoughts on going out and getting a loan or going out and doing something else just to be able to kind of get to that next step? Have you ever done that? Do you know anybody that has? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so loans, credit is obviously, if that's something that is available to you and there's an actual need, then I think it totally makes sense. And there's a lot of decent options out there. I mean, my favorite is the Chase Inc. business card, right? You can get you can get a Chase Inc. card. I don't know what it is these days, but back in the day, I mean, you could get a $30,000 limit with decent credit and 0% interest for 12 or 13 months, something like that. So, that's a solid option. And
to that point, I want to say something that had to be a learning lesson for me. Maybe I'm the only person that made this dumb mistake. I'm sure I'm not. But get that business credit card as soon as possible. I'll just be straightforward, man. When I was starting my business, luckily I didn't put myself into a bad situation by doing this, but I didn't open up I just didn't know. You don't know what you know, don't know. I had nobody to tell me that I should have opened up a business credit card to start. I should have been building my business credit. And then luckily I was able to, I'm able to pay off all my own credit, but I was just putting everything on my own because I was just already had that open. But do that. I guess is my point. Definitely make sure that you, as soon as you can open a business credit card, that you do that. You're using that one and you're building your business credit because two things could go wrong. One, you don't build up your credit, or two, your business doesn't go the way you want, and now it's all on your personal credit. It's going to affect personal finances, and that's a lot worse because those are separate. If you need to, God forbid, if you ever need to go bankrupt and shut down your business, that's only going to affect your business, as far as I know. This isn't, by the way, this is not financial advice.
We're not CPAs, we're not attorneys, we're not doctors, we're not astronauts, we're not politicians. So
just talking from.
Don't sue us. Don't sue us. But the business credit card, by the way, it does attach, even though indirectly they use your personal credit to obviously qualify you, and they
use it to qualify you.
But I think if you go to Liquid, I think they do come out personally on the credit cards.
Okay, cool. That's good. I haven't had that happen, so I don't really
Obviously, we want to avoid that no matter.
Yeah, we want to avoid that, but my point is that it's much worse if it affects your personal credit. So open that business credit card, use that as your sources and pay everything off through that. Don't put it on your because nobody told me this at first, man. I didn't know, and I just didn't really have anybody to advise me. And I'm sure I'm not the only person. So if anybody's listening to this, just do that as soon as possible because I wish I'd known.
I think you're I think securing, absolutely. Securing a credit card for your business, I think, is wise, but using that money and actually securing any kind of funding that is going to require you to pay something back, to do that and spend those dollars without having a already clear game plan that is going to work and yield returns and this sort of thing, that you should definitely avoid, right?
Yes,
unless
Sorry,
at all costs. So you hear people like Grant Cardone and those folks I love debt and and I love debt too, but they love debt because they're taking that debt and they're going to go buy a property that they know is going to yield a return, and it's almost automatic, and you know what I mean. That's why they love debt.
They love debt because
they're not taking out debt to go to the casino and you know what I mean, and try to figure something out and that sort of thing. So
they've also been doing business for 30 years, so they have plenty of experience understanding finances and how everything works.
Exactly.
Of course, in that case, yes, you love debt, but where most people are in the early phases is you don't understand how it works. At least I didn't. Unless you're have huge, even a college degree in finance is only going to help you so much. I mean, like that's a whole conversation in itself. But like, yeah, it's just like, yeah. So just, yeah, definitely be careful with that. Again, just not financial advice, but this is just, speaking from personal experiences. So yeah, I mean, I guess, and it's tough to answer like finance questions because it's like every scenario is different. So, I mean, I would say that the one thing to do, for anybody that's one of this is try to get like a CPA or an accountant or something, like, and not like a QuickBooks accountant, like a legitimate, and no offense to QuickBooks, I use QuickBooks, but like somebody that like actually is like a legitimate business CPA that can help you out and tell you what's a good idea, what's not a good idea, when you're in a good place to actually spend that money. And constantly tracking that and keeping up with your numbers. But it's tough to do sometimes. Like, I don't know how you do, Patrick, and going back to recruiting, for example, for a second, but like how to be like, okay, like I spent this much on like ads or whatever. This is how much I allocated from that. It's like, okay, did I actually get that from the ads, or was that more so from the recruiter's efforts? Or, like, there's so many variables of like knowing, like, was that actually what really caused me to be able to get this deal? And then like, you know what I mean? Like, so. Well,
each function in your business, if I call it the order to cash process, right?
Sure.
And so literally the order to cash is like from beginning to end, how you make money, right, in your business. So like literally to every immediate detail. And so functionally, there should be something that you're measuring in terms of an output that then is an input to the next thing in your business that is required in order to yield that revenue. And so if that is, if you're measuring the right things and your process is dialed in, then, even though, let's say on ads, right? Let's say we'll use the ad example. Let's say you have a conversion on a landing page or something like that. Well, even though that isn't like, okay, I have this many conversions, I'm going to make this much money. In a roundabout way, there should be steps down in your funnel where that does correlate to a certain degree and feeds other functional areas of your business for you to ultimately make that money, right? So like, an example of that would be, okay, I had 1,000 conversions on this landing page and I made $20,000. But what you don't see, maybe there's like 3 steps in there, right? So from the conversion page to booking a call, right? And then a show rate on a call, and then the close rate on the show, on the people that show, and so on and so forth. And so like, obviously those feed each thing. And so if you don't have the conversions, you're probably not going to have the book calls. And if you don't have the book calls and so on. So I think to a certain degree, you can measure that. Kind of zooming back out though, in terms of like how you're going to manage your finances and what you're going to spend your money on once you kind of hit a stable state and are ready to start taking steps up. Yes, at a high level, it's kind of ebb and flow between sales and fulfillment, right? But typically just the quick gate check of, here's an opportunity to invest in something that's going to do what for my business. And so like every time I'm looking at doing something, so for instance, we just added a new SME to our Millionaire Recruiter Club, MRC. And so making that decision, I asked myself, is this going to make me more money? Is this going to save me money? Is it going to make my process and delivery faster? Is it going to enhance the experience that my clients have in working with me? And so if I'm evaluating something that I'm about to do and invest in, it needs to at least answer yes to one of those 4 questions, right? If I can't, if I'm zooming out at the thing that I'm potentially about to do, and I can't say, yes, it does one of these 4 things, ideally the more it does, the better of likely a better move that it's going to be. But if I can't say yes to those things, then it's a no, right? If it's not adding to one of those four variables in my business or outputs of my business, then we don't need it, right? It's a bad move. So in the context of like high level, it's probably going to be in one of those 2 buckets of fulfillment and sales. But at a granular level, when you're assessing those things that you're about to go and spend money on doing and reinvesting those profits back into, that's a question that you definitely need to kind of like litmus test it, gate check it, if you will, and make sure that you're at least checking one of those boxes. So yeah, and then like I think the next question is like then how much money do you reallocate back into the business once you are cash flowing? And man, that's obviously it depends. I hate answers like that, but it depends on what you want out of the business, right? How much money are you pulling out personally in terms of distributions? Like for me, I know these days I have a minimum that I want to see coming out of my business quarterly. And so basically what we do is we have our reserve, And so at the end of each quarter in our operating account, whatever is above that reserve, we take as a distribution and we leave the rest, right? And so we reset that clock every quarter, and we've got a minimum that we want to see in there. And so as we move forward and invest in other things and grow out other spaces in our business, that's something that's definitely kind of backstopping our budget to do those things to a certain degree, which is obviously kind of part of it. But that's not to say if I see an opportunity to really improve my business and it causes me to, maybe take home less that quarter or whatever, but I think that the reward in the long term is going to be, exponential, then, for me personally, that would be a move that I would make. But that, again, that's in the eye of the beholder. So
I know, but it's that last part though. That last thing that you just mentioned is the tough one a lot of times, because there's always like some new shiny object or some new thing that you think is going to help you out, and you're never really sure, and you kind of have to take that risk. You know what I mean? So if it's one thing I've learned about that, it's that you have to be able to evaluate that very quickly. Like if something's not working, if you're going to invest in it, to be able to get out. Also, stop signing annual contracts.
Yeah, don't do that. Not on anything technology. Yeah.
Yeah, don't sign annual contracts for anything technology related, or even half the services that are out there, or data, or anything like that. If it's one thing, especially in the recruiting industry, that I know is like, do not sign annual contracts, with the exception of like for Crelate, which is a great ATS. Yep. It's the only one that I have now. No more Zoom Info, no more any of those, because like the data quality goes down. And so does like products. Sometimes they're just not, you can't use them again for, after a couple months. So I don't know, the space that the things that we do sometimes, it's really good that it's tech heavy, but the downside of that is it's never around, and they're always changing every couple months. And I know, that's very true with email and marketing and everything too. So.
No doubt. I think at the end of the day, Vince, like once everybody starts a business and they have this idea of like what life as a successful business owner is going to be like. And then you get in the shit and that goes away very quickly. You're like, okay, that was daydreaming. This is real life. And so, you're fighting, you're struggling to hit that cash flow in that stable state. Once you do, as a business owner, and you kind of at least have a much better understanding and clearer picture of what reality looks like in the business and in the industry that you're in, even though you don't know everything and you're still learning, you have a much better sense of that. And in that moment, you really need to decide, and you're not committed to this, but you need to decide and have an idea of what you want this to be for yourself, right? And not everybody wants the same thing. I personally want it all. Like I want to make literally, like my thirst is never quenched. Every milestone I hit, I'm just kind of unimpressed and like, okay, I want more than that. Like that was cool, but yeah, what's that look like? What is that going to be like? What is it? So on and so forth. But not everybody's wired like that. I work with a lot of people who are, I would say, in the fall season of their life, right? And so, they're winding down. They've had a long, successful career. They're not ready to do nothing. But they do want to do something that is profitable, but also allows them to kind of do whatever the hell they want, right? And act semi-retired. And so that's totally cool, right? If you want to make $250,000, $300,000 a year and work, 15 hours a week, that's fine. But you need to understand what that is. And then that will also help drive how you, manage your money and your profits moving forward as well. So like, those are all layers to the onion that need to be considered when doing that. But I think, the principles in terms of launching cash flow, cost control, right, and then reserve, and then once that's achieved, position of strength, right, and stability, hopefully if you've got the front end of your business dialed in as well, then your scale, right, sales, fulfillment, and you're just kind of stair-stepping until you don't want to anymore, or, whatever, that you're stuck and you need to hire somebody else, or, whatever that looks like. But yeah, I think that's, at least in my experience, that's how it's worked.
This isn't something I was originally planning on asking about, but actually, with that being said, so with you, have you thought about, I know we kind of discussed this before, like in one of our podcasts, actually, about acquiring other like staffing companies or whatever else. What are your thoughts on that? Are those kind of like next steps for you, or something that you kind of have in the pipeline right now? And I'll explain why I'm asking, because it's like right now, I'm like, for my business, we're focused only on direct hire, and we're doing well with that. And I'll eventually get to a point where that'll kind of just be, cash flowing and doing whatever else. But like, I realize I'm in the recruiting space, and this is probably going to only be interesting to people in recruiting. But like, if I ever want to resell it, it's not really that valuable if it's just only a direct hire focused business. And so eventually, like,
depends.
I really, I guess it depends, but for the most part, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
Again, I could be wrong about this, but it seems like most
multiples
of the time,
multiples are super low. If you do have a direct hire business that is sellable, right? And we could talk about, what makes a direct hire business sellable or not, but assuming it is sellable, the multiples, you're right. It's not going to be like some, tech software company, and it'll be sub 3x cash flow for sure.
Yeah, and maybe this is just my ignorance on not understanding what makes a direct hire business sellable, because right now it's like it's hard for me to like understand what that is, because I feel like most of the time, like direct hire businesses, the clients come and go, and if you ever leave, like can they really do that? So it's anyways,
it's a machine. We can get into that.
Yeah, my point of all this is like, it seems like what sometimes from my experience or my research is like makes it valuable is like having that contract side of things, because then you have like legitimate like contracts, or like the actual staffing side of things. So if I ever wanted to get into that side of things, like I don't want to have to do that from square one if I've already built up a good cash flow from direct hire. I would just rather acquire a good staffing company and incorporate that into my business rather than starting that from square one again. This could be, and this is where I'm kind of coming to you, like that could be a bad idea, but like I don't know. Is that something you've thought about, or what are your thoughts on like, acquisitions within the recruiting space?
Absolutely. I've definitely thought about it, for sure. And it's something that I'm constantly, me, I'm on BizBuySell and BizQuest all the time and looking at new opportunities and that sort of thing. And I do check out, staffing and direct hire companies that are listed on there just to, see what the multiple is and what the market looks like and that sort of thing. The problem for me in terms of like the different ways that you can leverage, for growth in the recruiting space, yes, acquiring existing businesses is definitely one way to do that. On the staffing thing, they are, I think, at least a little bit easier to buy and sell, right? In terms of, in terms of M&A than direct hire. But to your point, temp work also can come and go, just like contingent direct hire work. I mean, just by its nature, right? It's temp work. So like, unless you're in a niche that is constantly, using temp labor, and usually the problem they're solving for is battling against some sort of internal absorption rate, which we could go down that rabbit hole. But if that's present, then, it is definitely more sustainable and long-term and predictable. Otherwise, by the very nature of the type of service offering that you have, it is temporary, right? And it's constantly changing. It's short-term. So
I guess my thoughts are like that because I'm in the manufacturing space, and I think most people that have like manufacturing staffing, it's usually always there. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
Fair enough. Now, in terms of like, is that a good way to go about scaling your business in the recruiting space? For me, I have not pulled the trigger on it, and I don't really have any plans to. And the reason being is because I'm always asking myself, because I'm in both spaces. I'm staffing. I've done direct hire. I've got both of those already dialed in. Can I grow my existing business at a rate equal to or faster than me just buying something else? Because if I'm buying something else, the likelihood is, what am I really buying? I'm probably just going to buy existing client relationships, right? And maybe some employees and that sort of thing, to a certain extent. But like really bringing something new and revolutionary to my business, I don't know. I haven't seen anything out there. Maybe it is out there, but path of least resistance for me, and the smarter investment of what I do with my capital would be to reinvest it back into my business to grow and scale it. The other piece to that, and you and I have talked about this, and I don't mind sharing this on the podcast, but I do foresee there being a lot of really new, exciting opportunities in the recruiting space outside of just traditional, plain old direct hire and staffing. I think that landscape is changing and rapidly. I think it's inevitable, and I think most people are not hip or keen or dialed into what's happening, what that's going to look like. And so, that being said, if I were to invest in something, it would be something that would support the new growth areas that I see in the space, as opposed to just adding to something that I'm already doing at a very high level, right? So like one of the things that I would share there in terms of like, what the hell is he talking about? Like a foreign worker program, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a foreign worker program where you're helping companies facilitate bringing folks from overseas into their business. Like at some point, immigration law in this country, it's a bipartisan issue. And so no matter, what side of the aisle you rep for, that is something that is going to need to be resolved in the United States. way too much demand and not enough people to service that demand. So at some point, something's going to give. AI will take care of a lot of it in certain areas, right? And technology will help to solve a lot of those problems, those productivity problems. But there are still roles that, that at a very basic level, you still need a human being to do. And there's a lot of talent that are in, countries overseas with people that are ready and willing to come over that should be here, right? If they want to be, they produce, they add value, they pay taxes, blah, 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 right? So I think that, that would be one area that I would be way more excited in. Like maybe I, if I was looking at an acquisition to help grow my recruiting business, I'd be looking at something more along the lines of like partnering or merging with some sort of immigration attorney office, right? Some sort of law office that specializes in visa processing and that sort of thing. That way we could bring that in-house as opposed to some sort of external partnership or vendor-client relationship, right? That's an in-house turnkey solution that we're able to provide. So like those types of acquisitions would be the types of things that I'd want to pull in, right?
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does make sense. It does make sense. There was something that you said I would like to hear a little bit more about. You said that figuring out like what makes a direct hire agency like sellable or, valuable enough to buy. What are those things in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, so at its core, you need a business that is truly a machine, right? A profit generating machine. If a buyer is going to look at buying something, and this is, I think, the hardest step for a direct hire agency to make as an owner, to basically be completely removed from the business themselves and have their business completely leveraged out in SOPs and in departmental functions. And so that if I sell my business, Search Now doesn't go to shit because Patrick's not here anymore, right? Patrick hasn't been here for 5 years and it's making X, Y, and Z, profits annually. That's attractive to investors, right? Consistent, profitable cash flow that, is basically, built out in an organization. That in and of itself is at its root what makes a direct hire business sellable. Now, the problem is most direct hire businesses are not set up that way. Very, very few are. But, there are a bunch of publicly traded staffing and direct hire businesses that are out there, right? Yeah. Look at Robert Half, look at Ronstadt, look at Kelly Services, yes, they do staffing, but they're also doing direct hire as well, right? And so that's a great way to model that. There's not one person within any of those organizations that, if they up and left, that, their stock would go to zero or, whatever. And so you can replicate the same at a smaller level, but getting set up and doing that, from the jump and taking those risks and building out your team at that level is obviously, that's another game. And not everybody has the chops for it. So
that's fair. One thing, speaking about finances and kind of growing out your team and everything, I wanted to kind of cover today. For when you're getting to the point where you want to hire a recruiter, and I don't really want to specify this towards whether it's onshore or offshore.
Sure.
But we were talking about this earlier, but it's like, Hermesi talks about like each person that you want to hire, you want to kind of like level up. You want them to be better than your last hire or even better than you. So like when you're looking for like a good recruiter to join your team, like what are those qualities that you're looking for? Like, what are you asking? Like maybe during the interviews, how are you finding like a good recruiter to decide to bring on your team? And you know what? I actually am going to specify that here in the US.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, at the very front end of that question is you need to decide what kind of recruiter you want. Right. And so, yeah, I do co-sign that, like, you do want to hire people at least functionally better than you in that area. However, that isn't always the only way to go about it. You can hire folks that have raw ability that you can train and mold into a very high functioning and high producing asset to your business, and that has the potential to someday outperform you as well, right? And so that is also a viable solution in onboarding people and growing your business. Is it the fastest? No. Is it the most risky? Yes. It is the most risky, in my opinion.
And we talked about this last time where, like, sorry, go ahead. I think you're going to get to the point. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, so that out of the gate is the first question that you need to kind of answer. Am I going to go for some sort of rock star that is experienced? Or am I going to go for someone that is a little bit more affordable, but with less experience, more raw talent that I can help mold and shape into? And then from there, that really should define exactly, okay, what do these candidates look like? What do they need to have in place so on, and then what are my expectations of those, and how am I going to measure them to know whether they're going to make it or not, right? That's kind of like the progression of the decision tree, if that makes sense.
Now, and how do you decide between which direction you're going to go in with given those options?
Well, it depends on your situation. For me, time is what I'm protecting the most these days. It's the one asset that I just can't get back. And so I am, for me, the biggest risk when you're hiring anybody into your organization, the most critical time is that very first, week, 2 weeks, month, 2 months, so on and so forth, to basically in your mind say, yes, Vince was an awesome interview. He has delivered everything. He's exactly what we thought we were getting in Vince. He's delivering. He's going to make it. He's solving our problems, so on and so forth. Or he's not, right? So those are that is the very first thing that you need to figure out once you hire somebody, and as fast as possible, right? And so for me, the tricky part as a business owner, especially a new business owner who is still very young and not experienced in hiring people, this is something that they really struggle with that is extremely dangerous. And the reason being is because most folks, their natural tendency is they want to, especially if someone who has interviewed well, they've already kind of like been sold on, this is the solution, this is the person that we need, let's get them in here. And then from there, you begin to give them the benefit of the doubt, which is okay to a certain extent. The problem is where the benefit of the doubt is extended way too far, and now you're 3 months in, this person has not delivered a damn thing of what you thought they were going to deliver, and you're like, God, I think should I give them another month? Should I give them another week? Should I, what should I do? Like, and now you have wasted all the money that you've paid this person for the last 3 months. The 3 months itself, the time, which is the worst part, is gone as well. And usually when you're hiring for somebody, you're hiring to solve a problem within your business, right? Usually, hopefully removing a constraint. And typically, if time goes on without that problem being solved or resolved, it exacerbates, it gets worse. Yep. And so you're actually in a worse spot than you were 3 months ago before hiring that person, because now the problem itself is even worse than it was when you hired that person, and you're 3 months behind, and you're out the money. And so that is the biggest risk. And that again, you want to talk about catastrophic events in your business that you want to avoid. That's one right there. Yeah. And so for me to eliminate that psychologically, as someone who has to now not only hire this person, but then quickly evaluate whether they're going to make it or not, for me, it's much easier to hire somebody who I already am expecting to be a fucking rock star. That way, within 2 weeks, I will know whether or not they are the rock star that I thought they were or not. It makes it very, very simple. Like let me give them a little bit more time. Let me give them another week, another month. I think in a month they're going to have it. They're right there. They just have all that's out the window. Like, no, dude, you were supposed to be X, Y, and Z, and we're 2 weeks in, and you haven't even done A, right? And so that makes it very easy for you to mitigate your risk, make decisions, and move on. So in that same example, 2 weeks in, I know this person sucks. They're not what I thought they were going to be. I'm totally cool with cutting them loose because they're not the badass that I thought I was paying for. They're out. All I've lost is 2 weeks. Yeah, it's time, and that's painful, but it's way better than 3 months. The original problem that I'm solving for already is probably in this similar state. Maybe it's a little bit worse, but it's probably still relatively where it was when you started this process. And the money that you've spent on this person is only 2 weeks worth, whatever that is, right? A couple grand, whatever. And now we still have time to go and find that person, and maybe we tweak what we're doing. I don't know what that looks like. Obviously, it's going to vary situation to situation. But for me, that is a much easier, safer, faster way to solve that problem. But I get that not everybody has, the ability. And there were points in my business, obviously, that I didn't either. And so I needed to take the risk on this on the lower end, like project, if you will, where I'm getting someone with raw talent that I can kind of help build out and so on and so forth. So.
I agree with you 100%, man. And just to be completely transparent, as somebody that has made that mistake of like hiring those lower quality people because it was just too hard to put out the finances to hire somebody more, I wish I hadn't done it that way. I wasted a lot of time, and eventually you figure out what's good in the lower people, what's not, but you're still dealing with the lower person, right, and your problems are still there, and you've still wasted a ton of time and money. And like, I don't know, now I'm kind of like at the point, especially like after you and I have had a couple conversations and everything too, where it's just like, it does make a little bit more sense to, if you have to, save up that nest egg so you can hire a new person. Because like, even if you go, here's the risk too, that one of the things that I would add to what you just said is like, you could go and hire this person and want to give them a ton of chances and give them all the right training and see a bunch of potential in them. And then like for some reason or another, 8 months down the road, they might get a better offer and go and leave you. And now you put in all this work. And do you really want to have to like either go back and do that again or even like, you know what I mean? So like,
right.
I don't know, man. I mean, and I know sometimes the thing is the other side of that is sometimes it does work out, and then it's like, oh man, this is like such a great situation, and that's the tempting part about it is because it could work out. But like honestly, like for the next recruiter that I'm looking to bring on, and especially after talking to you a little bit, like it just doesn't. I would rather hire the more quality person that I can get rid of in 2 weeks and really know whether or not they were good. Before I go and ever go through that again. So if that helps anybody, like that was definitely my experience. Cause
I had the same experience, right? I mean, I made the same mistakes where it's like, and really the epiphany for me was like, God, my job, instead of like hiring somebody and adding a resource to my business and to free me up to go and do other things that are growth oriented for our business, all I've done is I've now changed my role in my job within the company to constantly finding a replacement for the cheap person that I just brought in, right? Because I know every 2 or 3 months, like they're going to be out the door for one reason or another. Either they didn't make it, or they get burnt out, or they leave for better, greener pastures, or whatever the case. And so now I'm just constantly, on this, carousel here of constantly bringing new people. My business isn't growing. I'm still stressed and frustrated. The clients are probably, the experience that they're having is probably feeling very unstable, and we're not delivering, and the risk there of losing those
clients sometimes
and you will lose business
and clients. Yeah. And people don't realize like that's a real risk. Yeah. Sorry.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that is the risk. Now I have had Tanner. Tanner's my kind of my example of this. I hired a kid named Tanner who I knew. I went to church, grew up in the church with his mom, and
shout out Tanner.
Anyway, shout out to Tanner and Tanner's mom Stephanie. And so Tanner joined my organization while he was still in college. He reached out as an intern, and so he interned with us, and that just kind of turned into a full-time role. And yeah, that worked out really, really well. That was a great situation for me and for the business and for him. But my experience of hiring folks that are inexperienced and bringing them up to speed in a relatively short period of time, I would say he's the exception, not the rule, right? That is almost like having to pull a rabbit out of a hat and making a miracle happen. I know you and I have talked about this before. It's okay if every now and again, especially as you're like trying to take that next step out of the gate at the very beginning, to like pull that rabbit out of the hat. But as a strategy to scale your business, what you're doing, the activities and the things that you're doing need to be done in a repeatable fashion, right? They need to be done with relative ease. They can't be just this massive like, oh my God, I gotta go. We got to go find another recruiter. I don't know where we're going to find this person. Like it can't be like that every time. It needs to be more of like, okay, these metrics are now, we're triggering these things in our business. We're crossing these metrics. The signal is that we need to grow. Okay, let's run the fucking growth playbook. Let's go and find another recruiter, right? And then we go and do that thing. We execute those steps. We find that person. We bring them in, and boom, asset has been delivered. Growth is being achieved. On to the next thing. Like that is how businesses scale. It's not like, oh my God, everybody get your compass out. I don't know which way is, you know what I mean? Like, get your sundial out. Let's try to figure out what time it is here. Like, it cannot be like that every time. And if it is, then it's probably not going to work. So.
And honestly, man, like even like what I got lucky, like the first, you realize sometimes you look back on your business, you realize how many times you've gotten lucky, and I've gotten lucky a couple of times where like, it did work out the first couple of times when I was in that early phase, but like, imagine if it hadn't, dude. Like that's how like so many people go out of business too. It's like,
could knock you out. Yeah.
I feel like that's like a worse, it's in a way, it like if now knowing what I know now, I know that like it actually is a worse scenario to hire those less experienced people earlier on, because like if they end up being bad, or if you hire multiple ones back to back that end up being bad, you spent all your time giving it to them. You haven't grown out your business. You haven't made any money, and you're in a way worse place, as opposed to like if you were already profiting, cash flowing, or whatever, then go back and maybe take some risks on some people that could grow with you, whatever. Because whatever, I'm good either way. But I would say don't take that risk at the beginning, even if you feel like you have to. I got lucky a few times, and I'm very fortunate right now with the people I have on my team. really, really, really good. But like, I would say that don't take those risks earlier on, because you could really, not everybody gets lucky, and I got lucky that I did, but like, just assume that you won't. You assume that you won't be getting lucky. Assume that it's going to go bad. And so like, just hire the better person from the start, even if you have to save up or whatever. Like, that's the better, and just rely on yourself for a while if you have to, and then hire somebody that is, that experience level that you can bring on that's actually really going to make a difference.
And that's the key. What you just said right there is rely on yourself until you have to. That is the answer, right? So like, okay, well then what do I do? Well, you grind it out, you put the work in until you are in a position to do that. Now, in the recruiting business, this isn't for any business, but in the recruiting business,
we'll just talk recruiting for a second. It's
okay,
it's going to get too confusing otherwise.
Yeah. So my preferred kind of recipe of going from full desk solopreneur, 360 recruiter to team is a half step in hiring that lower end resource, but using them as more of supplementary and augmenting your activity, right? Yes. That is the difference, to increase your personal output in your business. Then
explain what you mean by that real quick, because I don't think everybody's going to get that.
Sure. So my recommendation, and what the playbook that I like to see run when you're going from 360 to team, is essentially you're going from just yourself and then hiring some sort of offshore sourcer, right? Someone who is doing behind the scenes work, not client or candidate facing, right? So things like candidate market mapping, scraping, loading up candidate outreach campaigns, appointment setting candidates for screenings, right? Back and forth in the DMs, collecting resumes, like a lot of the admin stuff that eats up your time and keeps you off of the phones with clients and candidates, which is how we make money, right? Mm-hmm. And so that is the very first step, but you need to be super fucking clear on the scope of that person and your scope still in that business.
Yep.
And the scope of that person is to help increase your output as the business owner, as the end all be all of your business. And then you need to have a plan with what you're going to do with that increased output. Because what will happen is a lot of people will at least maybe get that part right, where it's like, cool, I got the offshore recruiter, I got the VA sourcer or whatever, they're helping me. And then now my production has increased a little bit, but they don't know where to go next, right? And they just stay stuck there.
Yeah.
It's just them and their VA. Maybe they get another VA or whatever, but it's just the three of them, and they never go beyond that. And the reason is because they don't reallocate, take that increased output, that revenue, that profit, and reinvest it to really remove the constraint, because the constraint that you're solving for is your time, right? You're limited on your time. And so until you get another you in who can do those things functionally, right? Client face and candidate face, you're not going to hit that next level. And so with that increased output, then you take those profits and you go get that badass, right? That needs to be the 1, 2, 3 step. And now you're beginning to leverage out, and you're going from owning a really cool job to now a true business owner and leveraging out. And, and then from there you look for different functional areas to fire yourself from. So that's, that would be my recommendation.
Yeah. And you need to be able to measure that person that you bring on. So like, one thing I don't like about just hiring a virtual assistant, just to have an assistant that's going to do different things every day, is like, and correct me if you feel like otherwise with this, but it's just like, I would rather hire like a sourcer that like, I know that they need to be doing like 8 resumes an hour, and I know that they're on top of that, and they had this. And honestly, especially if you're going to be outsourcing to the Philippines, for example, you don't want them doing they're much better when they're just good at one thing. You know what I mean? And so like, if you're going to hire somebody, I would just say hire them for like one task that takes up a lot of your time that you can measure them on every day. You know that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, because you also have to look out for, especially when it's virtual, people are double dipping. They're usually working more than one job. You have to make sure that your money is actually going into something that is really like being, like the person's dedicated to what you're paying them for, essentially. That's right. And so there are a lot of red flags and things to look out for. I mean, we could get into that all day, but like, it is important to be able to measure them and actually keep them to certain metrics.
The one thing, I mean, so for us, the one thing that we do measure a couple things with our sourcers, but the one thing that we absolutely care about, just like with recruiters, the one thing that we care about is placements. Yeah. Like, I don't give a shit how many people you screened and blah, blah, blah. Like, I do, but ultimately none of that matters unless you're making placements, right? So I don't care if you had 10 candidate submissions. If we didn't make a placement this month, then that's an L, right? That wasn't good enough. And so that one thing for sourcers is interviews scheduled, right?
Okay,
Interviews
cool.
scheduled with candidates.
Because I was going to say
like,
the placement thing can be a little bit more reliant on the recruiter. Yeah.
Totally.
Okay.
But for the scope of a sourcer, like, what do I want them delivering consistently in my business? I want them flooding my recruiters' calendars with interviews of qualified candidates that they can go and present to our clients. Like that is exactly like that is their reason for existence. Now there's a lot of things they do upstream in order to deliver that, which we also measure just in case we're not hitting those KPIs, right? We're not getting those calls scheduled. We have something to go back and look at in terms of inputs that we could improve on to yield those results. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that is what they're incentivized by doing. And so they get, they'll get commissions based on hitting those targets and that sort of thing. So that is that's the other piece of it, of kind of breaking out, okay, what are these resources doing? How does it all feed into each other to increase the output, And so, I don't know, I said a lot there, but.
Yeah, no. Oh, real quick question. When you're saying interview scheduled, who's scheduling the interviews? Is it the sourcer or is it the recruiter?
Sourcer. I don't want my recruiter doing anything in the DMs. I want them on the phones and Zoom calls all day, every day, doing screenings and making candidate presentations and help facilitating offers.
So you're talking about so how do they schedule those interviews? Is it usually through LinkedIn messages or
email or text? It just depends on what channel we get them in. But yeah.
Okay. See, I guess I was doing mine differently, where I was just like, how many qualified resumes, meaning how many resumes were approved that were sent over to the recruiter. Because like one thing that, and I agree with your method because now what you're saying just makes sense. But like one thing you also have to, the reason I was going to say that it would maybe not be the best way to, not you, but if somebody's ever hiring a sourcer and they're measuring them based off placements, but the recruiter's doing the placements, that's a bit unfair to the sourcer. It has to be
doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it has to be something that they can control. You can't,
that's right.
You can't have a sourcer that's only sourcing and sending resumes over to a recruiter, but a recruiter then has to call them and make the placement. It's not the sourcer's responsibility to do that. So you just need to make sure that what you're measuring on is under their control. And so now that you're saying that, okay, that makes sense. So you were just
exactly
doing things,
right.
You were just doing things differently than I was, and maybe I need to talk to you about that at some point.
I mean, so like for the sourcer, for each person, like the skill set itself, you need to be able to identify, okay, what can they do at a high level? And so to your point that you made earlier, usually, if you get a really good offshore sourcer or resource or whatever, they can do repeatable tasks that are not client or candidate facing, right? Mm-hmm. Usually, like with enough training and enough reps, they can usually get that down. So like what we have them do in terms of scope is our recruiter will basically create a candidate market map criteria that they'll go and plug into the tools that we use to create that candidate market map. Then from there, they will scrape those people and make sure that at least at a high level, they're qualified based on the information that we passed over that was derived in our discovery. From there, they are launching those campaigns to those people. And as positive replies come in, they are basically collecting resumes, making sure that they're still qualified, at least paper screened, right, and qualified for an interview, and then booking them on our recruiter's calendar for an interview. And that's it. Like, that's literally all they're doing. And that way, the recruiter themselves, what are they good at? Where do they add the most value? How do they deliver the most results for the business? Well, the way they do that is screening as many candidates as possible, right? Getting as many qualified candidates presented as possible, facilitating offers with as many clients and candidates as possible, right? And so that's all I want them doing. I don't want them, sourcing on LinkedIn. Can they do it? Hell yeah, of course they can do it. Can they scrape? Absolutely. But is that where they're adding the most value? Absolutely not. I'd rather pay someone $1,000 a month in the Philippines to do that and let them focus on making placements. And so that's how we have it split up.
We should probably we could do an entire podcast on actually, now that I'm thinking about it, like, because I would like to understand your process a little bit better about sourcers and what exactly maybe tools you have them using and how you're measuring them and exactly what they're doing. What you're saying right now makes sense, but that's not the way I was doing it before, and I don't think that's the way that most people are doing it. How long have you been doing it that way, by the way? I just want to ask.
I think we started that in March or April of last year, so a little over a year now. Yeah.
Okay, cool. We'll talk. We're going to sideline that conversation for a quick second, but it'll definitely be a future talking point. Anyways, I want to kind of get back to the one thing though, real quick, as far as like what you're looking for. So, all right, let's say you've decided you want to hire a higher level recruiter based in the U.S. what are those things that, because now with the expectation that they are a high level recruiter and you should be able to evaluate them within 2 weeks and you are going to be paying them more. What are those things that you're looking for, like that to be able to kind of, move forward with that, feel comfortable with moving forward with bringing that recruiter onto the team? Because people interview well. So like, what are some of the questions that you ask? What are you looking for when you're looking to bring on a recruiter to your team? Essentially is what I'm asking.
Yeah. I mean, so the biggest thing for me is, aside from experience, and the obvious things of, okay, what niche have you recruited in and blah, blah, who have you worked for and what tools have you used? And
Okay.
All of that,
let's expect that's not obvious. So maybe
aside from the obvious stuff. Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
aside from the obvious stuff, some of the juicier, like less obvious stuff that I really, really covet and find important is the soft skills, the EQ, and the motor of the person that I'm potentially bringing in. I want people who just can't turn it off, right? They can't stop. Like they have a high motor. They're just high energy, all about it. Go, 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 go. Like they exude that energy. You can feel it. It just oozes from them. I do not want wallflowers. I do not want people who are low energy. I do not want people who do not seem passionate or excited about what we're doing. Because obviously the output of that, our clients are going to, sense that, and that's going to be bad. So that's one thing. The other thing that I like to do is I like to ask them in terms of how they qualify candidates and how they screen candidates, because that's going to be a big part of what they're going to be doing, and they need to be able to do it at a high level. I like to understand what is their ideology, what is their philosophy, what is their experience on how do they do that, right? And so the obvious thing is like when you're screening candidates, like, oh, well, I take the job description and the client's requirements, and then I ask them these questions and make sure that they have that. And so like that's obvious, but there are also very specific things. And if you've done a lot of screenings and you've been in this thing a lot, you know that there's way more to it than just that, right? And so I want to know. I'm not looking for them to give me the exact right answers of what I personally run in my own business, but I want to see signs that there's thought outside of like just the boilerplate, like here's the JD, here's their resume, are they a fit, right? Because there's multiple layers to that. And so I want to see the wheels turning. I want to see that they're dialed into certain things. Like an obvious one that a lot of people don't get is, how do you sell a passive candidate who is not actively looking on leaving their current job and making a move? Like, it doesn't matter whether they're qualified or not. They want this job. How are you going to make them excited about this job, right? And so, like, that would be an obvious one, right?
I wouldn't say, okay, that's obvious to you, Patrick, because you've been in the business for a while. So, like, we'll backtrack for a second.
But for someone who's a badass, you're hiring a badass.
Yeah, okay, yeah, true. Good point.
You're hiring a badass, right? You're hiring someone who is an extension of you. You're bringing in another Vince Pennix. Yeah. And so that Vince Pennix has to know that, right? Yeah. Or at least know something, like there's something beyond just what's on the paper. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. So yeah, someone new is not going to get that, and I don't expect them to. And that's the problem, right? Because those are concepts that take time to get. And so, you get into, something with someone that doesn't already have that baked in, at least that's not the expectation. Well, then you find yourself in feeling obligated to give them runway to figure it out. And sometimes people don't get that, right? Not everybody's going to get those types of things. So that's the risk.
So what are some of the other things, like, if you don't mind maybe giving some other examples of things that people have given you that have maybe impressed you and made you hire them, or things that maybe you look for that aren't just the job description questions kind of thing? What are some other things that outside? One of the biggest tells for me, at least in my experience so far in hiring people that are real badasses, is they tend to turn the interview on its head and start interviewing me about the opportunity. Yeah. And I love that. I've seen that. Yeah.
I love that. When they start really kind of asking me specific questions on how I run my business and how I believe we should be delivering for clients, and what tech stack we're using, and vision for the company. Those are people that give a shit, right? And I want people that give a shit and know the lay of the land, know how things work, have probably experienced in other organizations things that didn't go right. And so those, aside from like answering all the right questions and doing all the right stuff, those are the types of things at the tail end of conversations with folks where it's like, yeah, okay, I'm feeling really good about this person because they're asking questions just like I would. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. And when do you know, all right, so like
I feel like it's easier to bring on some of the lower to me. And I'm not saying this to sound insulting, but the lower to medium level like recruiters, because they'll kind of walk into anything. But like, not to walk into anything. I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but they'll walk into an organization that maybe isn't as organized and doesn't have that clear vision and all that kind of stuff because they need a job, right? And so I'm not saying this sounds bad, but it is what it is. But a higher level recruiter is going to be screening through all those things. So my question related to that is like, at what point do you know that your organization is ready for somebody like that? You know what I mean? Because like now, if I want to hire this person and I want to be able to attract this type of person, my organization has to be at a certain level in order to attract that person. And so when do you know that you're ready for that? Because, you know, like if at some point you have to hire that person because you have to be stepping to the next level. When is the right time to know that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, so the easiest way to there's a couple of different ways you can skin that cat, but the easiest way to really kind of know is if you look at the scope. So if you go out and you're going to hire somebody, the very first thing you need to do is say, okay, what is it that I actually need in my business, right? What is it that I need functionally, and then what are the skill sets in a person that they need to have in order to be able to deliver those things, right? So that's the need, and that defines the need. The best way of figuring out whether you're ready or not is asking yourself, okay, if we'll use the sourcer because we've already gone through that scope, right? Market map, scraping, loading campaigns, appointment setting, right? If I were to hire that person today, would they be able to literally plug and play into the systems and processes that we have right now and execute that, assuming they know exactly what to do, right, and follow our process exactly? Would they be able day one to step in and begin executing and delivering to their scope and nothing else day one? Not, hey, help me set this up and then you're going to do that, right? Or help me figure out what tool we're going to use here and then we're going to go and do, like, that's, if you find yourself like, ooh, yeah, no, we don't have that in place and we haven't done that yet and we're still figuring out what to say here, and you know that, then you're probably not ready to bring in someone that's a badass. You know what I mean?
Well, that's yeah, I agree with what you're saying, but I'd say sometimes that's the tough thing with bringing on like the high level recruiters though. It's like, okay, it's kind of like this, like you have to have a certain amount of clients to feed that really good recruiter, but like, what do you do? Do you get all those clients and then you're not filling those positions for a while and then bring them on? You know what I mean? Like, it's like you kind of have to like bring on the recruiter and have them in place in order to then bring the clients on, because you can't like have all the clients because they're going to leave you as soon as you don't deliver in 2 weeks.
Well, I've got a little bit of a formula for that.
Yeah, please share.
Yeah. So the formula that I like to pay attention to know exactly the timing of when we should at least start thinking about bringing someone on. Yeah. Now, I'll say this with a caveat. This is not a silver bullet. Like when this formula says this, we go and hire somebody, because you obviously have the backdrop of reality and what's going on in your business day to day. But this is a really good, trigger, if you will. So like, hey, things are kind of tightening up, and from a bandwidth standpoint, we might want to start thinking about bringing people on. And so the formula is this: essentially, you would take the average number of new business, the new clients that you're bringing in month in and month out on a monthly basis, right? So let's say you're bringing in, I don't know, a new client a week, right? 4 clients a week, or 4 clients a month, plus your active, stable house accounts that you're currently working. So not new business, people that you already have an agreement with, that you've worked with and have roles that you're currently working, right? So the sum of those two, new business and current business, minus the churn that you would see in the new business, right? Because if you're working contingent, you know there's going to be a certain level of churn there, meaning there are going to be clients that you bring on that are going to be kind of go nowheres, essentially. And so usually we sniff those out pretty quick. So we want to back out the churn out of the total demand. And then from there, we want to...
Before, hold on, sorry. Before you go, how are you measuring churn? Like, because like that could be, churn could be, I feel like, you could know a new client's going to be bad within 2 weeks sometimes, but sometimes it takes a little bit longer.
Yep.
So how do you, if you don't mind...
So it's measured as a percentage of new business, right? How much new business are we closing, in a given time period, right? So new client comes in, did we make a placement with them or not? Now, our fulfillment cycle ranges anywhere between 2 and 4 months. It just depends on the role and that sort of thing. So within 4 months, if we haven't made a placement for a client, then that was a dud. And to your point, usually we know that way before then, usually within a couple weeks, right? At least 1 or 2. Within 2 weeks, you should know everything you need to know about your client, right? Yeah. If you're working the roles and working the account and that sort of thing and making submissions, you'll know everything you need to know about your client. So usually it doesn't take 4 months. But that's how basically the new clients that we bring on that are not placeable, essentially, that we're not able to place for. So we want to back that out of the demand. And then whatever that number is, our true demand, our net demand, we divide by the total capacity per recruiter, right? Whatever that is. So for me in my business, I don't want my recruiters having, this isn't hard and fast. This is obviously depends on the account, but on average, I don't want my recruiters having more than 7 house accounts that they're working at any given time. Now, if they have 7 house accounts and they only have 1 role to work, then we'll probably increase that a little bit. And conversely, if they have one account that has like 17 roles open and they're all legit, like then it goes the other way, right? So like there's with reason. I would say no more than 10 to 15 active roles is kind of the sweet spot. So like you can measure it in both ways. But basically we divide that net total demand by however many house accounts we want our recruiter to have, and that will give us a number, right? It'll spit out a number, 2.4, 5.6. And so that should be the number of people to service the demand, the net demand that you have in your business. And so if you're running that formula constantly and the number it's spitting out is higher than the current team that you have, then it's probably a good idea to start thinking about bringing someone on, right? At least at the early stage. And maybe you should be jumping through your butt to get it done. But that is a good kind of data-driven way to know that, hey, things are heating up here, and I think we should bring somebody on. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's something. Everything you're saying makes sense. I think that's something, at least because I'm a visual person, I would like to maybe we'll do a webinar or something at some point. But like see visually a little bit more, because I think that's, bro. I mean, I know for me, because we've talked about it a little bit more, I have a better understanding of it. But like, if it weren't for talking to you, I think that's something that a lot of people, when they're growing their recruiting agency, they've actually gotten to a point where they're successful on their own. They're trying to start bringing on recruiters. That is like a really tough thing to figure out. And you can either learn that through experience or learn it from somebody that already knows. And I'm going to do a quick plug. That's why it's great to join groups like Patrick has a MRC,
Patrick, baby.
Yeah, Patrick has a millionaire recruiter club that where you can learn all these things, and he goes into all these things in depth. So if you're a recruiter trying to either start your business or grow out your business, please check out his group. It is excellent. So
give us a holler. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so the one thing that definitely has to be present is increased demand in your services, right? And whatever your shit is that you're selling. In our case, it's recruitment services. There needs to be an increased demand in order to scale your business. If that is not dialed in, if you're not getting clients with relative ease or consistency, then you should dial that in first before you even think about, adding to the service side of your business. And that's a great illustration of kind of what we were talking about in terms of money management at the very beginning, right? Like, I'm not going to build out a badass team if I don't have the clients to serve. So I'm going to go get the clients to serve. I know chicken and egg. I'm a client guy. I think you should go get the business first and then deliver. And so to a certain extent, and so get the business. All right. Do we have enough to service it? Maybe not. If we're not certain on it, then we need to bolster this. All right. Now we got capacity. Let's go get some more business. Back and forth. And that's a great illustration there.
And that's the toughest part about this industry, is in the very beginning when you're trying to do both of those things, because like you're having to try to do the business development and the recruiting. Like that is like it's a tough place to be in. And I feel like that's why a lot of people don't always make it. But when you can get past that first initial part, or if you have enough funding to bring on the team, right at the beginning to do that, that's why. That's just reality, man. This is reality,
totally. Well, hey, I mean, listen, but real life, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like, these are real life situations and real shit that you have to go through as a business owner. It bothers me a bit because, the get rich quick thing is in recruiting. It's obviously like, sometimes it's marketed. It's marketed that way. And, other business, I see it all the time in like Amazon FBA and like this sort of thing. Like, listen, I own 5 different businesses right now, and I can tell you some I've started on my own, some we've acquired, and not a single one of them, has been what I would call easy. Not a damn one of them. You're always going to have that moments where it's like, I don't know what to do. I'm uncertain. I don't, this is not obvious to me. This is not clear. I'm taking a risk here. Like this is scary. Like those are all very normal things that you're going to experience. Now, as you get bigger and as you scale and grow, I think that the decisions become easier to make, and they're a little bit more obvious, quite frankly. At the very beginning, it's very hard, to your point, because you're doing it all, and you're still trying to figure it out, and you know what I mean? Money is tight, and like you don't have all of the other resources that we use for leverage. It's just you and your time. That's the only leverage that you have, and so that is the most challenging part. And it's never going to be like, hey Vince, here's a note from God saying, hey, it's time to hire a recruiter. Like this is not going to happen. You know what I mean? It's not going to happen.
And the tough thing about it too is like it's like you have two wallets and they're both like you haven't put any money in them. One of them being knowledge and the other one being the actual finances. And so like it's like you haven't built up the knowledge to be able to know these things. And then you also a lot of times are low in the finances too. And so like once it gets to a point after a little while where your knowledge is getting really good, but maybe your finances aren't great. Or sometimes what happens is the reverse. You get lucky early, your finances go up good, but then you start making mistakes because your knowledge is low and then this starts to shoot back down. And now you're kind of getting like, I'm telling you, like, this is just like having gone like, and these are the people, if anybody's telling you this, they know they've actually gone through it. Like there's so many people that have like, or like, you know, I know some people, and this is nothing against them, dude. If I had like, you know, a fund where somebody gave me a bunch of money to get my business started, I would have taken it. You know what I mean? But like, you have a lot of people that like, at least that I know, or like, you know, I went to school with where like they have like a trust or something like that, and like, you know, they had a bunch of money to always fall back on or to kind of get things started. But like when you're really starting from like not a lot or barely anything at all, you're in such a risky position. But like you can really later on help out a lot more people because like, you know, you've been there and you've been in like the real trenches of like knowing what that's like. And, you know, it's like, dude, it's like, it's some real shit. Like, it's tough, bro. It's like, when I first got into this, man, it's kind of like what we were talking about with podcasting. Like, you don't understand why so many people quit at first. You're like, oh man, especially when you have some early success, you're like, you know, why I just keep doing this. And then when you get in, you're like, man, I see why a lot of people don't make it. Like if I if I had like I've had to like personally, dude, I've had to like sacrifice and give up on so many things that like, you know, like, dude, there's like, I can't even take the chance of having some things that like my friends are doing right now. But like, I know later on I'll be way, you know, better off, or at least be closer to my personal goals. And there's nothing wrong with like having a family early and like doing all that kind of stuff. But I can't even think about that right now, you know, and that's a risk, and that's part of life of what I've got to do. But like, you know, that's the name of the game, man. So
no doubt about it.
Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, okay. So I think that's probably a good stopping point for today. I think we're about an hour 15. So nice. Our next podcast, I think we're probably going to have a guest on, but soon enough we're going to be doing a first in-person podcast.
Let's go
next month, man. Like it's about time. Yeah, I wish we could do them regularly all the time, but like,
well, maybe you never know. You never know.
Soon enough. There's a strong possibility of that.
Absolutely.
But for the next episode, I don't know exactly who we're going to have on, but we'll probably have.
We've got a few options.
Got a few different people that we want to speak with, and so we're excited to be able to share with you guys. And Patrick, it's always good talking to you, man. So
likewise, brother. Always a blast.
All right, man. I will see you next time.
Have a good one, gang. Bye.
All right.